Welcome to The Real Pro-Choice, where you will hear stories of miraculous healings and restoration. What would you do if you were scheduled for an abortion and are now having second thoughts? Find out next how important it is for the church to have the right answer.
The choices we make affect our lives. Sometimes our choices not only affect our own lives, but everyone connected to us. Maybe even those we're not aware of. God says, choose life, so that you and your descendants may live. Join Donna Grisham and her guests as they share the choices they've made and how Jesus has set them free. Next on The Real Pro-Choice.
Welcome to the show. I'm here today with Emily Hoffman. Emily, welcome.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
It's good having you. Emily, could you tell us just a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I am a wife to my husband, Clay Hoffman, who's also my best friend, and a mother. Our youngest is 14 and our oldest is 20. We have 3 girls. 2 of them are my stepdaughters. And I'm a homeschooling mom. But right now what I'm doing is equipping Christians to defend their pro-life stance.
Okay, wonderful. But you also have a story to tell. So you tell me a little bit about your childhood, your upbringing.
So I grew up in the church. I was raised Episcopalian. I went to Catholic school, was baptized in a Baptist church, and then I finally landed at a non-denominational. But I had a ton of religion with absolutely no relationship.
Okay, so yeah. So there's something that happened at 19 years old. I know that your parents divorced.
Right.
Okay, you went through the pain of that, went through some things with that. Do you want to elaborate and to bring us into that place at 19?
Well, I mean, I was a daddy's girl. My parents did divorce when I was in 3rd grade, and my dad was kind of in and out of my life, but I still was a daddy's girl. Mm-hmm. And at 19, he was diagnosed with cancer on a Monday, and I actually found him Saturday morning, and he was deceased.
Okay, and then what happened after that? What happened to you after that?
We were living in Atlanta, and I bought a one-way ticket to Jacksonville, and just to escape the pain. And instead, I found a boy, and not long after, I found I was pregnant. Mm-hmm. And so even though growing up in the church, I was the one that, I was the one that said, I want an abortion.
So you were pro-choice, really. You had the mindset of it was a woman's choice.
Right. I mean, I was fully sold the lie that was just tissue, that the first weeks, it's nothing but a blob of tissue. That's the lie I was sold. And I believed it. Mm-hmm.
And you defended it.
I did.
You defended it for years after years after years, and then you find yourself, you're pregnant, and what happened?
So I remember I walk into the abortion clinic, and the first thing I notice is that there's other women in the waiting room, but they're all looking down. Nobody was making eye contact. Mm-hmm. So I just walked up to the window, and I paid the cash that they told me to bring, mm-hmm. and they gave me paperwork and a number, and I went to sit down. But what's significant about that is the number, because when a nurse would come to call a patient back, mm-hmm. they didn't use names, mm-hmm. not last names, mm-hmm. not first names. You were just a number.
Yes.
So it completely dehumanized the entire experience. So I sat down, and I began filling out the paperwork, and tears I remember I thought, I'm gonna just lose it right here. So I sat the paperwork actually in the seat next to me, and I walked outside to make a phone call. Mm-hmm. And the phone call was to a woman I called my Titus II.
Can you explain to us what a Titus II, because most people aren't going to know what Titus II.
So she was an elder in the church. She was an example of the love of Christ. I knew I wouldn't receive judgment from her, but I felt she would give me wisdom and the guidance that I needed. Even though I walked in there as like feeling like this is nothing but tissue, I'm okay to do this, I knew deep inside
There was something inside of you that was stirring, that's saying inside, this is not right.
This is not right.
There's something, even though you were standing for, that it's a woman's choice and you should make it, and you were just making, like, you had second thoughts.
Absolutely.
What did you do when you
So back then, it was payphones. So I made a collect phone call to her, and I told her my situation. I hadn't spoken to her in a while, but after telling her everything, her words to me were, "Well, Emily, that seems like the most reasonable choice." And so I hung up the phone and I walked into the clinic and I sat back down and I waited for them to call my number.
So in that situation, you call a woman that's a woman of God that's really you look up to, and you really actually wanting her to probably say, don't do this. Did you, there was something in the back of your mind or in the back of you that really probably wanted, and I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, but there had to be a second thought, because you wouldn't have went out and wouldn't have called her, so you were looking for something other than what the answer was there.
I was looking for help.
Yeah.
I was looking for wisdom. I was looking for guidance. I knew something was not right. And I knew I was in a lot of emotional pain. From my dad's death, it was extremely traumatic.
Yeah, because that sent you down,
Right.
You were on drugs, you were doing drugs and things like that.
Yes.
So that really, and then to have this, so
Yeah, and so I was really looking just for someone to walk alongside with me, to help me, because I knew my mind was swirling, everything, emotions, on top of being pregnant, everything that goes on physiologically, and I was just looking for help.
So you go back into the abortion clinic. What happens when you go back in?
I filled out the paperwork and I waited. When they took me back, nobody spoke. And then I was put in a room. The doctor came in, he didn't speak. They performed it, it was excruciating. He walked out and I laid there in the fetal position for probably 30 minutes, just wailing. And that's what I remember the most,
Okay, there's much more to this story. We'll be right back right after this.
God values all life, even from conception. Donna Grisham and the vision of her ministry, Journeys of Choice, is to empower women through counseling, parenting classes, and by providing alternate options to choose life for themselves and their unborn child. With prayer and dependence on God, Journeys of Choice is committed to saving the lives of unborn children, while at the same time offering courage, assistance, and healing. For more information, visit journeysofchoice.org.
Welcome back. Emily, you were on the table at the abortion clinic, and you were in a fetal position because you were just devastated at what just happened, what you just made the choice to do. What happened next?
Well, I got up and I was picked up by a friend and was taken home. But that was really the beginning of the spiral into drugs and alcohol, because then it was just like the pain was overwhelming from my dad's death to the abortion.
Yeah.
I just spun out of control.
And so you started using drugs and that was your coping mechanism. You just, didn't want to deal with any
I didn't
of
want to feel the pain, the emotional pain.
pain of it.
Yes.
So how did you transition from that into where you are today, like the healing, where you've...
By the grace of God, honestly, it was one Sunday evening, and I was sick and tired of being sick and tired. I was coming down off of a probably 4 or 5 day binge, and I called my stepdad, and I said, "Come get me." And it was about midnight, and he got in the car from Tifton, Georgia, and drove to Jacksonville, Florida, to bring me back home.
And he brought you back home. So, I mean, you're at a place now where you're totally healed now. So how did you get to this place of being healed? Your stepdad picks you up. I mean, he takes you, I take it, he takes you back to Tifton with them, and what happened?
So it was actually years later, after I'd already married, and I had my child, Selah, and I ended up having a miscarriage. And when the doctor went in to do the D&E, I was awake, and while he was doing it, he looked up at me with tears in his eyes, and he said, "I'm sorry, this has taken it's taken way longer than I expected." But it was the tears in his eyes that I realized.
This was a doctor in Georgia, and you had a miscarriage, and you were having to go through a D&E, and he must have been a compassionate doctor.
Yes, he was a Christian.
Okay.
And definitely full of compassion. I mean, it bothered him.
It really touched his heart that you had just had the miscarriage, and that you were having to go through the heartache of this.
Right, right. And I knew then there were emotions inside of me that needed to be healed. And that's when I found Forgiven and Set Free, and went through
that class. And after you went through the Forgiven and Set Free, for people that don't know, it's a post-abortion, used to be a post-abortion counseling class, but it's called a Bible study, and you walk through the healing of your abortions.
Right, naming
your babies,
right.
doing all that, and going through the emotions of each thing.
Right.
So you went through that.
Right, and then, I set on the path to dig deeper into my faith. And then I had a little bump. My husband got really sick, and my mom committed suicide. And that's another turning point. And I decided to really dig into, I wanted to know who God is. There was no unbelief, but I wanted to know Him. I wanted that relationship.
Right, because you grew up in a home with religion. You knew all about religion,
Right.
all the different churches, and that wasn't enough. There was still that missing piece.
Right.
That relationship with Him.
Right.
Jesus.
I could quote scripture, I could do all that, but there was no relationship, and so I started with apologetics, and it just awakened my spirit to who He is. And then I took, I knew I wanted to defend the pro-life, the anti-abortion.
And so you mentioned you want to defend pro-life, so what did you do to get yourself on that path to defending pro-life?
I took Scott Klusendorf's class.
Yeah.
It's Ethics of Abortion, Defending Your Pro-Life Stance. And he really digs into all the different arguments, the science, the philosophical.
Right.
And it's, that life begins at conception. Science affirms this now. There are a lot of arguments that come from being pro-life, especially when you're a Christian. Well, what are you doing about this? What are you doing about adoption? Or what, gun control? And the whole thing is, one, it is wrong to intentionally kill an innocent human being. Two, abortion intentionally kills an innocent human being.
Right.
Conclusion, abortion is wrong. Now, when I say wrong, I'm not saying it's my like or dislike. I'm saying there is an objective moral truth.
Right.
The lie is constantly, you can't be pro-life. If you're pro-life, you're against women.
Right.
No, I am for women.
Exactly.
I'm for women to be able to choose.
Yeah.
Choose their doctor, choose where they want to go to school. I am pro-woman.
Yeah.
I am anti-abortion.
Right. Yeah.
So.
Your daughter, speaking of your daughter, you actually told me a story that your daughter was defending the pro-life in a situation. So could you tell that story?
Yeah, so she came to me and she said, I kind of got attacked on social media for standing up for my pro-life stance. And she said that the young girl said, well, what about in instances of rape? And Selah took it, upon herself, and she was wise and looked up, and statistically, she said it's very low, and I was proud of her for doing that, but I said, here's the thing, we have to be a little more empathetic to that situation, because it does happen, that's your story. So I told her, I said, look at it this way. When a man rapes a woman and pregnancy ensues, they're 3 human beings, right now?
Right.
So is the man who raped the woman innocent or guilty? And she was like, guilty. And I was like, what about the woman who was raped? Is she innocent or guilty? And sometimes when you do this with people, they're like, what are you talking about? The woman, what? She's innocent. How could you even? And I'm like, okay, what about the baby inside her womb? Innocent or guilty?
Wow. Well, there's much more to this. We'll be back right after this.
I invite you to visit journeysofchoice.org and get this book. You may be in a situation where you are at a crossroads between the choice of life and the choice of death. Life may have stopped for you, and you are fearful of what your future holds. Abortion, rape, adoption, and more are covered in Donna Grisham's book, Journeys of Choice. Donna shares her own story, along with 14 additional inspiring testimonies from both men and women who were at a crossroads. Each one shares the choices they made and how those choices affected their lives and the lives of others. Their words offer wisdom for making godly choices in the midst of trauma and crisis, and bring hope, healing, and supernatural redemption to anyone with a broken past. As you read these pages, you will see for yourself the truth behind choice and the effects of the choices we make. See how God wants to intervene in your situation and change the course of your life forever. Find hope and healing for those who have been faced with an unplanned pregnancy. Know that God has not left you and wants to bring hope to your hopelessness. Every testimony in this book, Journeys of Choice, will bring healing and hope to the brokenhearted, revealing what was meant for evil and harm, and show you how God can turn it around for good and blessings. This heartfelt book will inspire, motivate, encourage, and assist you on the road to recovery that will bring a wellspring of hope into your life and others. Get your copy today.
Welcome back. I'm here with Emily Hoffman. Emily, in our last segment, you were talking about your daughter's debate online with somebody that had said, well, what about rape? And you gave the three things. Number one, the question, you asked the question, was the rapist guilty or innocent?
Right.
And then
the
woman
baby.
and the baby. And we only found out there's one in those three that are guilty, and that's the rapist. The other two are innocent. So do you want to just elaborate a little more on that?
Yeah, and I'll elaborate too some on, what I do as far as preparing Christians, because there are still a lot of Christians out there who think that they're pro-choice. I mean, I stood in front of one in my driveway not too long ago where she said, well, I wouldn't have an abortion, but I don't want to force my beliefs on other people. Why not? So you're okay with intentionally killing an innocent human being? Mm-hmm. I know I say that often, but that is the pro-life syllogism.
Right.
It is wrong to intentionally kill an innocent human being. Abortion kills an innocent human being.
Right.
Okay? So, and even in the church, statistically, 9 out of 10 pastors will not preach a pro-life sermon. Mm-hmm. Okay? They believe it's too political, it's too controversial. Right. There's women in their congregation that may get offended. And however, those same women are probably the women that need the healing.
To heal, yeah.
So when pastors don't stand firm on their pro-life, why as Christians we are pro-life, we are anti-abortion, it actually denies women and men the opportunity to heal. Because there are men who have contributed, taken a woman, paid for an abortion, that need to walk through the healing just as well. So here's the thing, when I go into defending my anti-abortion stance, I always start off with science. I say, the science of embryology, you can go to any textbook, the science of embryology, and it states very clearly, life begins at fertilization. It's amazing. What happens at fertilization is it is no longer, sperm and egg cease to exist. The zygote, embryo, there's a lot of different words, but it has its own unique DNA, separate from mom and dad, And so it's amazing. And you can go into science and look at that. So that's where I start. And then there's some philosophical things that we can get into, but there's a great acronym, it's SLED. So size, the human is the size of how it should be in the womb. We can't discriminate against size, because if someone's taller than me and I'm shorter, then does that make them more of a human? The next one is level of development. All right, so a lot of the philosophical debates are, well, it can't think, it's not, the development. But that really, what gives humans value? Their level of intelligence? No. We're made in the image of God.
Exactly.
All right, so
yes.
E is environment. The whole my body, my choice. No, that baby is exactly where it should be. And D is the degree of dependency. You know, and again, that baby is uniquely separate. I mean, from mom. I mean,
Right.
the DNA,
Separate DNA.
it's a unique, distinct, living human being in its perfect stage of development of being a human being.
Right.
Just like a 2-year-old is different from a 14-year-old. So that little tiny embryo is just the same. You compare a 2-year-old to a 14-year-old.
Right,
It's
exactly.
the embryo. So the degree of dependency is, you know, we can't deny that at some point in all of our lives that we're going to need help from another human being.
So do me a favor, look in the camera and tell the audience, as far as where we are as a church, what you feel that they need to hear to, you know, if they get that call, if they get the same call that you made to the woman in the church, what do you feel that you could help them with?
You know, I think today in our society, what is happening is that objective truth is being replaced with subjective truth. So feelings overrule facts. And what I believe the church, as believers, we need to really stand firm in that life begins at conception. We can look at science to prove that. Then philosophically, we can go through and kind of debate, but every child is spoken, is life. Whether it was the whole unplanned pregnancy, God planned it. He wasn't overwhelmed. He's not overwhelmed by it. He knew that life before he spoke the universe into existence. You know, he's not ever surprised by anything. But I really believe the church as a whole needs to start speaking firmly about that there are objective moral truths. You know, it's not about feelings and what we like or dislike. I go back to that bumper sticker. Don't like abortion? Don't have it. No, it's not about I don't like abortion. I believe that it intentionally kills a human being, an innocent human being. And I can prove that with science, and I'll use philosophy. And then I always want to bring it back to Jesus, because the gospel is the only thing that can usher in healing for these women and men that have endured the hardship, the trauma, the torment of abortion. And I think as a whole, we just need to talk about it inside the church and outside of the church. It's time for us to take back the ground that we lost.
Yes. Well, thank you, Emily, for being with me today. And thank you for joining us today. Visit my website, journeysofchoice.org. I would love to hear from you. See you next week on The Real Pro-Choice.